Alright, today is BKC's Take It Easy Sunday Relaxation Spectacular, where even if you wind up watching or listening to this on any other day but Sunday, you will have a reminder to take it easy and to slow down. And with the pace I'm operating at right now, you will have an example of it. So maybe you will similarly find yourself lulled or, feeling more like, you know what, I gotta take some time for myself. So, yeah, I promise we will get to the titular series of C versus baddummy for the first set of the grand finals of the final ever Callous Invitational. Yeah, it's pretty exciting stuff. But I have had a very active last, 18 or so hours. And I also might interest you in, human affairs of intriguing types of communication and interaction. And if that's not your thing, then you can skip through this video until you get to... Excuse me. Fall is here and I love it, but it also makes you sneeze every once in a while. So yeah, if you really want to get to that series, then feel free to skip through this video. Or if you don't feel like listening to me slowly analyze it, which I will be doing, slowly in terms of I'm going to break it down thoroughly and not just, narrate whatever happens. Well, Tyranitar switches in. That's interesting. Oh, so Skarmory switches in now. That's interesting. So, I have the replays in the pinned comment if you really just need to see what happened above all else. Although, I would, encourage you to then come back and take it easy, because that's very important for your health. So, the reason why there is a DPPUU replay on the screen right now is because I love DPPUU, of course. But also because some people don't have me playing in another tab, and they like to have something on the screen. So I was like, you know what, while this rambling goes on, then I will give you something to look at, something cool to look at. Both this replay and the next replay I have ready are both great games. So... yeah, my last 18 hours or so, this is the story of my activity, which has now led me to saying, it's Sunday, I'm taking it slow. So, I'm usually not a big club goer. Not that I, mind it. It can be a lot of fun, but emphasis on can. With the right people, or person in this case, and, the right music in the right place, then it can be wonderful, of course. It can be a great time. But it can also be a frustrating waste of time and money. One that might even, open a gaping hole in your soul. Or really just expose that it's there. So it's got to be timed right. Plus, if you go too much, then it's not even as fun. So, last night, myself and someone close to me went to one of these places, and it was a great time. And, then we came back and went to sleep and, watched a couple episodes of the new season of Sex Education. That's not a euphemism. That really did happen. And, because I'm a wonderful person, I did not talk about how much the lack of splatter and gore in the new season bothered me. I just want to take it easy and watch some of these annoying teenagers explode. I'm sorry, but oh my god, they're so annoying. And I know that's the whole idea, but it was grating. But I mean, it was fine to just take it easy after. Anyway, so I was in a great mood this morning, and I was really looking forward to my Sunday, because on Sundays I play basketball for 2 hours, and it's great. And for, a million reasons. But I often foolishly forget just how let's use the nice version and just say competitive. Some of the people there can get. Would you call it competitive if a guy is so angry that his teammates aren't passing well that he literally jumps up and down screaming his head off at them? It's like, dude, it's 11:30 on a Sunday. Come on. And the passes weren't even that bad. I mean, there were lots of issues in these. Everyone playing there is good for sure, but you have that classic issue of someone deciding, oh, there's 4 defenders right under the basket. I'm going to drive into all 4 of them. Oh, I didn't score. Yeah, the shots just started falling. I don't know. Anyway, that's all fine. It's all about running up and down the court and getting a workout in and having fun. So the details usually don't matter. Although it is a little unnerving when someone gets as angry as that gentleman got. Then there's also the other phenomenon, which is universal in basketball, I'm pretty sure. But the phenomenon of someone who is all elbows when they've got the ball, and sometimes without too, and they're also the quickest to call a foul. Oh, that's real pleasant. Yeah, you can really feel the aggression come out there. So, yeah, I was doing my best to not get too frustrated. Like, oh, clearly, this gentleman's got some stuff to work through. If he's getting, or these gentlemen are having some stuff to work through if they're getting this riled up and physical. I don't have a problem with physical basketball. I have a problem with excessively physical basketball that is because it's not really basketball. Like if I wanted to go boxing, I'd go boxing. Yeah, that, which, and then of course, dish it, can't take it, which is not just which is not just a case of like physical aggression, obviously. If we want to take it to the Pokemon world, then the classic example, I don't know how many players I've seen over the years who are just the biggest trash talkers when everything's going their way, and as soon as someone dishes it back to them, then they just start crying, like, yeah. So, is there something to that whole overly competitive thing? Oh, I wonder. Anyway, so, usually I was just, so yeah, I got a little riled up at the end. Yeah, and, oh man, I was really, really proud of myself though, because I was particularly annoyed because that physical basketball did wind up in me, overly physical, I should say. It did wind up in me getting my hand jammed pretty hard, but yeah, so I've been icing it since I got home. And yeah, I was just, as frustrating as it is, then I am, make myself feel better with the sweet, sweet memory of how badly I iced that motherfucker's ankles after he pulled that shit. Oh, that was really satisfying. Yeah, and then, yeah, so I overall, I had a great time. Yeah, so we are almost at the end of this game. Oh, perfect. I didn't even plan it like this. I haven't even been looking at the screen. So we've got our usual 10-minute preamble, which is pretty standard for the channel at this point, I think. We've got the Scyther finishing off the Zam. And now we will shift from the second greatest tier of all time to another one of the greatest tiers of all time, Advance OU. So, do all the... yeah. I don't know where I was going with that. I think I gotta eat. I gotta make myself some chicken after this. I think I might go full on chicken and salmon. Sometimes I'm bad about checking the expiration dates on my food, and then I'm like, oh man, I gotta make my food today so I didn't waste it when I bought it. I gotta get organized with my schedule on these things. So, C has... oh, I should adjust the dimensions because you don't get their username in fully. Whoopsie-doodles. There we go. It's not such a long username. I mean, SuperEpicAmpharos is the most. I'm 10 years old, and this is what I came. I mean, I'm a guy called Blazin' Kickin' Chicken. I can't really say much, but at least I have the decency to not use that username in full. I have for some tournaments before though, just to be funny. I think I did it for Smogon Tour 16 finals. Anyway, so C, as we're going to be referring to them, is in the losers bracket. And Bad Dummy is in the winner's bracket, meaning that if Bad Dummy wins this series, then the tournament is over and Bad Dummy is the winner. Whereas if C wins, then it resets and then it goes to a winner-take-all series. And if I remember correctly, Callous Tour finals the grand finals are best of 5. So that's the assumption I'm going in with. And to make this video even more fun, I have not watched this series yet. So I don't know what's going to happen. For all I know, we could see 2 Arcanine leads or something. Because Bad Dummy has, just to give a little bit of player background without going too into it, the gist of what you need to know is that Bad Dummy generally goes with more standard teams, which... please don't get me wrong as thinking, standard, boring, easy, safe, whatever. It's like, I have no problem with standard teams as well. I have no problems with standard teams being used. In fact, that's why Bad Dummy has been so consistent. He's less, I guess the reward is lower technically, but I mean, he keeps winning because his teams are always solid. I don't know how many of them he's been building himself because they look familiar. But that's not necessarily an example of someone stealing teams, because in an older metagame like Advanced in particular, both with the more limited pool of Pokemon and the fact it's such an old metagame, then many good players will stumble across the same types of teams. Just naturally, just like, oh, look at that, Skarm goes well with Gengar, who would have thought? That kind of stuff. And so... I don't know how much of that has been Bad Dummy's own spins on standard takes, because I have not been following this tournament super closely, to be honest with you. And I don't know how many. I think a couple of the games I've seen, I know. Oh, that's definitely someone else's team. But hey, that's Bad Dummy's definitely been. No, I don't think anyone expected him to make it this far. So this is his breakout tournament. A very impressive performance. Yeah, truth be told, I was kind of rooting against, like very, very passively. I was rooting against Bad Dummy, not because I had no problem with him winning, but after every series I saw him play, I just saw him talk about, oh, I'm so bad, I'm so terrible, I suck, I shouldn't be winning. And it's like, dude, come on. Like, okay, I know I guess I would prefer it to the extreme of players who, just love filleting themselves as soon as they switch Skarm into a ground type. It's like, oh my god, I'm the greatest to ever play. Like, that is unbearable. That is truly insufferable. No arguments there. But that whole, oh, I suck routine. I recognize that self-confidence is something that a lot of players struggle with, myself very much included. So I understand where it comes from. And I hope that succeeding so much in this tournament, making it all the way to the, in the winner's bracket. He has not dropped a series so far this tournament. Making it so far, I hope that that does something for him. Whereas C, I have also not been following their games very much, but I have seen the Pokemon equivalent of crack cocaine multiple times. I think there was a Shedinja cited recently against Ban Manaphy or something. And just generally... they could not be further apart in terms of play style. Whereas Bad Dummy is generally, safe team, safe. Well, I say safe, but that feels like a pejorative. I promise it's not. But just like more established stuff. I mean, all these. I hate how all these. Well, I don't hate because I'm zen and taking it easy today. But sometimes it might get on my nerves a little bit. How reliable teams, that's a better one, how reliable teams tend to get shoehorned into this category of boring or safe or whatnot. Whereas, hey, look, the goal is to win, and if they're reliable against the great majority of the metagame, then they're reliable. Whereas C just goes absolutely insane with stuff that is just outright not viable. Like, even if Shedinja wins a game, that does not make Shedinja good. It makes Shedinja a very, 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 very risky gimmick that was brought once against a super specific opponent in certain conditions. And yeah, I don't think you're going to be seeing Shedinja in this tournament. But what I admire about C is that they are absolutely fearless in putting these kinds of utterly lunatic teams together and succeeding with them, obviously. I mean, making it all the way to the finals, beating several great players along the way, is no mean feat, especially because these insane teams tend to be with a play style that I personally don't think is very good in terms of like mixed offense. So I really admire that approach. I'm not suddenly going to start saying that Snorlax is good. Apparently that has become a meme in advanced circles that I hate Snorlax. Like, no, I promise, I really do not like it. I think it is a bad Pokemon. And I think offense suffers for it. But yeah, that's enough background preamble. So yeah, we got some crazy stuff that was probably never been seen before against solid reliability. But it's not and this is something I would also love for advanced watchers / listeners / enjoyers or whatever to take away, in that a lot of players come to advance and start thinking of things in terms of matchups, as in team type A or Pokemon with this kind of team A, is good into B but bad against C. And you really got to avoid those matchups where it's like, look, good team, like baddummy is great as a great example. Like, he's bringing all around good stuff and has been taking on all manner of the metagame, which gives him the ability to outplay whatever he's going to face reasonably. Whereas C, also, the play level has been extremely high because they are playing extremely aggressively with their tools to compensate for their many, many, many flaws. Structurally, I mean, I'm not like criticizing the teams themselves for being bad. I don't even remember them, honestly. But whenever you run an extremely aggressive team in a metagame like Advance, and I know I stress this all the time, but it bears repeating, that if you have a really aggressive team in Advance, no matter how aggressive it is, you are not going to be fast and strong enough to overwhelm anything, and you are going to have some sort of defensive utility. And that defensive utility C has really been stretching of, Pokemon with very little bulk and or bulk investment, I should say, and really just leveraging typing and good sacrifices and extremely aggressive play, because the second you fall behind with a team like that, that's it, you're toast. Skarmory can do a prolonged comeback for sure, but, if your offense team just, it's like, oh, whoops, I slipped up and now Arrow or Starmie just destroy me, then that's very hard to come back from. So you really have to have your foot on the gas right from turn one. And I really am looking forward to what this complete clash of styles that couldn't be further apart the kind of results it will yield. It'll be interesting. My bold prediction, not so bold prediction, is that based on their play styles, like, C has no problem being extremely aggressive, and I don't think baddummy is necessarily passive, but I think he might be susceptible to getting overwhelmed by the pressure and not planning his foot and, making the long-term game plan that he needs to withstand the assault. Like, yeah, because this happens a lot with advanced offense. You'll be, under heavy pressure for a couple turns, but if you can ride out that storm, then your late game speedy Pokemon will carry you to victory. That kind of thing. But if he's feeling overwhelmed by all the pressure coming at him, then that might not happen, or he might feel too pressured to make aggressive moves to come back into the game. So, yeah, 10 minutes of non-related preamble, and then 10 minutes of, setting up the series, I think. So I'm going to take a bathroom break because I've been drinking a lot of water today, and then we will start. Thank you for your patience. I hope you have been enjoying so far both the human interest story and the setup for this series. Alright, I do send off some texts, and now we are ready to go. So it's important to me that I respond within reasonable times, because, you don't want to do that thing where you think, oh, I'll respond to that later, and then you just never do, and then it's awkward when you do that. And I have a very powerful dislike for people who are on their phones constantly and just don't respond. And it's like, dude, we have to do this together. This is a business thing. So anyway, 23 minutes in, we're getting to the main event. All right, let's see what happens. We see a Metagross lead and a Swampert lead. Swampert lead. Now, the only reason I would ever think it's anything else is because I know C does crazy stuff. But traditionally, you run Swampert leads just to be safe against a Metagross exploding on the first turn with Choice Band, because you run Protect on it. So you stifle that kind of... CV Metagross is so threatening in the lead slot that you want that ability to slow it down early in the game. Like, at least later in the game, if it's going to get in, it has to contend with your own offensive pressure. But on turn 1, it's very scary. So Swampert has traditionally been used in the lead slot for that purpose. I don't know if C is running that or something else, but that's generally the case. Whereas Metagross, of course, can be a million different things. So there's a switch to Celebi on the Pert, and nice move from C there. It skipped a little, so we'll just redo it. But C went right for an Ice Beam. Nicely done. Knowing that Metagross is almost surely not going to stay in. HP Grass Metagross is such a rarity these days, and it really does not seem like baddummy style. He's generally favoring more slow-paced Scarm things, and even stuff that doesn't have Scarm, that it's generally on the balanced side. So there is Celebi not taking that much from the Ice Beam, so I think it is... it definitely feels more like a defensive Pert, which makes sense. So great start from C, met with the own Celebi to block the Leech Seed. So Celebi into Celebi, you better be confident that's a Leech Seed Celebi, because if it's an offensive Calm Minder, then that could get very nasty very quickly. But I think C knows the calcs for the Swampert Ice Beam, and seeing how little that Ice Beam did to the Celebi made them think, oh, well, it's more likely this is going to be some sort of bulkier Leech variant. And that could suggest quite a few things about the rest of the team. For example, there's likely to be a Magneton if there's a Metagross and then a bulky Celebi. It's very likely. And so you can start ruling out other things as well for your long-term planning. Now, we don't know what C Celebi is. It could be a million things. In comes Gyarados, and if that Magneton wasn't telegraphed enough already, now it definitely is. So what this also makes me think, bulky bulky Leech Celebi on teams like this, if it's Metagross and Gyarados, then you have the strong possibility of Swords Dance. Not guaranteed, but generally, when you have Celebi on this kind of team, you just switch in and use it defensively because of Leech and Recover and BP, Momentum, all that stuff, and then you just kind of almost may as well chuck Swords Dance in there, because if you can pass an SD to a Gyara, then you can bypass its power issues. So, also makes me wonder, is that Metagross Agility? Now, Celebi's going to get out of there, or BP out of there, actually, which is relevant because it BPs the attack drop it gets from Gyarados' Intimidate to Aerodactyl. So I don't think Gyarados necessarily wants to stay in here, because it's still going to take a hefty chunk from Rock Slide, and we don't know what it's going to do in return. Unboosted HP Rock won't KO. If it's Thunder Wave, maybe. But I also don't really feel like C is going to stay in here with Arrow, because you don't want to -1 Rock Slide into Metagross and give the momentum back. I mean, Celebi is practically a switch to Arrow at this point. And you don't want to start getting too cutesy against, the Gyara one-on-one either. It's like, oh, I'm going to -1 HP Bug or EQ or whatever. It's like, oh, the Gyara stayed in. I mean, I still think it's very unlikely, but I think it's likelier that C switches out here, hoping to force out the Gyara. And that still doesn't mean that Gyara necessarily needs to stay in, but it does lend it more consideration. I mean, it depends on the set. Like, if it is HP Rock or T-Wave, then yes, stay in. But the really ambitious move would be, there's no way that Arrow is staying in, and even if it does stay in, it's not Rock Sliding. So I'm going to stay in and try to catch a switch, because the question is, what else on C's team is going to really be comfortable at coming into Gyara? So, I mean, per Celebi Arrow, this suggests the possibility of Skarm and or Magneton. Tyranitar very likely as well. So, that's definitely one way to look at it. And if it is I mean, I really don't like this set. I don't think it should be anywhere near as popular as it is. But it could also be a substitute Lychee Berry Arrow, and that makes it even less threatening at -1. So right now, a lot is super unknown. Very fitting nickname. So there is the double to the switch to Swampert and the switch to Metagross. I don't think I care for that Metagross switch, specifically because of what was just mentioned. Like, there's no way that Arrow's staying in and all that. And if you are going to switch into that Arrow, you may as well just go to the Celebi. Specifically, so something like that can't happen. Now, C was very confident that, the Gyarados was not staying in, because Swampert is not a Gyara answer. If you know it doesn't have Taunt and you have Toxic or Roar, maybe. So that would have been, a fine move. Whereas if you go right to the Pert on the Gyara, then you are really telegraphing, yes, I have something to answer. Whereas now it's still more ambiguous. So it could have Toxic, could have Roar. It's not going to have HP Electric. I say that now, watching a couple turns, it's going to. But no, I think that'd be very silly. I mean, maybe it's like Curse, which also... But I don't think it's going to have Curse, Ice Beam, EQ, and HP Rock, so you can rule that out as well. So, yeah, they could also be saying Swampert is just, like, even if the Gyara stays in, like, what's it going to do, DD? I mean, you really don't want to test that theory, I don't think. If the rest of your team is not good into Gyara, and an Arrow. But if there is a Scarm, then Scarm will wall that Gara hard and, spike up as Magneton comes in, and then you get Revenge killed. And then C lets the rest of the pressure... Well, it has the spike pressure and the knowledge of what's going on, so they will be able to navigate it that way. So it's a good Swampert switch. It doesn't necessarily have to be able to beat Gara one-on-one. I think I should add that to the previous point, because if they do have a Scarm, then that's going to sit on Gara all day, and you don't even have to immediately Toxic or Drill Peck or Roar or anything. It's not going to threaten you at all. And Bad Dummy will go to the Magneton, and you're not going to avoid getting magged. All you want to do is get that spike. Especially because if you're switching into a boosted Gara in this scenario where Gara does DD on the switch, and you're not going to be able to avoid taking damage from it. So, you're not even going to be preserving. Not that you would be, well advised to preserve your Swampert, your Skarmory, even against Mag offense, even if it was healthy, even in general, because then you're just not exerting as much pressure as you would if you got a spike down. But once you take health, then it's even less of a question. So there's Gara coming back in to be less pressured from the Ice Beam than Celebi, which that's nasty. That's really, really gruesome. Yeah, Celebi would be forced to recover maybe, and might thud into the other Celebi and BP, and whereas Gyarados puts more pressure on, because if Arrow switches in, then Arrow is not necessarily an ironclad answer, and Gara could force Scarm in, and also depending on C's T-Tar set, if it has Rock Slide at full health, it's also a Gara check. Get the Sand going, put more pressure on the Celebi and the Gara, but that freeze really makes things nasty. There's a Salamence. And Gara's not thawing out. We don't know the set yet. If there's no Mag, it's going to be a Mixed Mence. And that is not a banded Swampert. I was going to say, that 42 to lefties to bulky Swampert, that's banded, but it looks like it's just a regular DD Mence. And because that Swampert does not have lefties, so it is offensive. And that makes me think there is a Magneton even more, because this is a lot of Pokemon that really do not like Skarmory. So, offensive Swampert, not going to be very threatening when there is a full health Celebi. So, Bad Dummy just goes for the straightforward Ice Beam. Less to hit Salamence staying in and more to try and make up some ground against C's own Celebi. Crit, freeze, something. Because Gara is one of Bad Dummy's biggest threats, and you just lost it, for now at least. So, Meta comes in on Celebi, not going to mess around with it. With getting mashed or anything. We just still don't know anything. I mean, Call Mind or SD. I should say SD more likely with this likely Magneton thing going on. But we don't know if it's got Leech or not yet, or if it's got an attacking move like Ancient Power or HP Fighting or whatever. Sometimes even HP Grass for Roar Swampert. Mash into Pert does not do very much. There's another. Just he keeps Ice Beaming that switch, and he's getting rewarded for it. Nicely done. And now Meta doubles back into Salamence. Salamence also posing a massive threat to Bad Dummy's team, not just because it threatens non-Metagross physical attackers with Intimidate, Metagross of course being protected by Clear Body, but it also threatens to sweep because Bad Dummy's Intimidate poke is frozen, and Swampert has already taken a hefty chunk, over 40%. And once that DD goes off, things are going to get really nasty. Especially because we don't know what the last is. It's almost certainly going to be Magneton. Or no, I will go out on the limb. This is not a brave prediction by any means. It is going to be a Magneton there. And then we don't know what the last is. If it's going to be, T-Tar or Heracross or whatever. Salamence, that's a more obvious choice than Heracross, actually. And, Bad Dummy's own Mence could help, but, Heracross, obviously not. And Pursuit T-Tar maybe, as long as the Mence doesn't have Brick Break. There's a great double There's a very nice double because he either puts more pressure on the Swampert, just goes for the straightforward mash. And that was a nice move on Bad Dummy's end because let me try to articulate what I'm thinking here clearly. So right now C is very, very much ahead, and that is predicated on the idea of Swampert, just switching into Metagross repeatedly, and Metagross blowing up on Swampert is not necessarily devastating because C has a bunch of other Pokemon that are good into physical pokes. And, with the Swampert is not a Gyarados answer, and the Gyarados is frozen, so, the Swampert is not necessarily going to be the most important thing here, right? So even if Metagross explodes it, that's fine. Now, or potentially anyway. Now, Bad Dummy does not just want to keep thudding into the same patterns here, right? So if you mash into Pert, it does nothing, then you switch out, or maybe you blow it up and have that situation we just covered. Or you just keep switching. Swampert forces in Gyara or Celebi and Ice Beams on the switch, and then Salamence puts pressure on. Nice. Then you're just falling behind, right? So that would have been, because Mence does not necessarily want to tango with Metagross one-on-one, especially because because Salamence is such a threat. If anything, I would be more inclined to protect Salamence over Swampert at this point. Although we don't know the last two for sure, but one of Skarm and or Mag and T-Tar very likely as well. So I think it'd be perfectly reasonable to prioritize Mence because it does not just help defensively, it can also just end the game if it gets a free DD because Swampert is going to get plowed by it. So with this in mind, it is very reasonable to expect Bad Dummy to say, I'm behind, I cannot just keep thudding into the same pattern over and over, and I've got to make something happen. And that is where, I've mentioned this in some other videos as well, but if you can spot that comeback attempt and really step on its throat, then you will seal the game off and you will prevent any comeback heroics. Now, you got to do it, smartly. You don't necessarily want to risk the Pokemon that wins the entire game just because you think, I have a feeling, But it's a reasonable thing to expect that Bad Dummy is not just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And so, you could also read this as just that Salamence is too scary and I can't afford to not hit it here. But I think it's that in conjunction with expecting C to not go to Swampert, because if you see Swampert is safe for all the reasons we've mentioned, and if you just keep doing that safe move over and over, then you open up a potential for a comeback. Now, I don't know what that necessarily is for Bad Dummy yet, because we don't know the last. Magneton +1. But I know that with C's very aggressive playstyle, they do not just want to fall back into defensive comforts, especially in an offense-on-offense game, because that defensive comfort is not necessarily enough to cover everything. They're like, I preserved my Swampert. Oh, well, there's a Heracross, and I wish I had Salamence instead, So I feel like staying in with Mence here is a kind of middle ground of sorts, where the upsides can be really huge because you catch Bad Dummy, EQing on the switch or making a switch himself. So you will be able to catch him off guard and really cement your position ahead. So, because again, if you just keep doing that mash into Pert thing over and over and over, then you're just not going to get anywhere. So I was the move I had in mind that maybe Bad Dummy might pull there is I'm going to go to Gyarados as Swampert switches in because it'll get me lefties and a turn to try and thaw out. Or I can make them think I'm going to try and thaw out, free switch to Aerodactyl on the very likely still frozen Gyarados, and then I can pivot into something else and make something happen. Right, because right now, but it's not tenable to just continue to thud over and over, because right now C has Bad Dummy with the 4 Pokemon revealed on both sides. C has Bad Dummy, by the throat, both offensively and defensively. So I think that this turn, 13 in particular, was a lot more interesting than it might seem. especially because with the rolls, we now see that, that EQ 53, so we don't know what the roll is exactly, but I would not be comfortable with that as a 2-hit KO. And getting Salamence mashed means that its sweep potential just dropped. Like, it is no longer a threat to sweep. So I think with C's aggressive playstyle, very good for overcoming deficits in terms of defense, but they have enough of a defensive advantage that Bad Dummy cannot really punish yet. You know, even if they do reveal a Heracross, and oh well, here's my full health Salamence that also threatens to sweep you. You know, so I think going to because like you EQ here, you get mashed. So all in all, I want to say that was a great play by Bad Dummy. You know, I think it wasn't just I'm going to thud into the same patterns over and over, but you know, auto clicking, but more of an awareness that C is very, very likely to try and catch me on a turn like this when I'm behind. And yeah, so I'll leave it there because we spent a lot of time on this turn as is. So I would be surprised to see C go for it. Oh, I guess they do. I guess they really, really want Metagross down, which, you know, makes sense for Arrow. But I don't know. I think actually, you know what? I take it back because with Salamence, I mean maybe, but with Salamence weakened, then I guess it's less valuable. So you may as well extract more value out of it in weakening Metagross to at worst KO range. For Arrow, you know, at best you just get the KO. Should Bad Dummy even stay in? But so no, I like that Mence move. I think you can make a case either way, because you don't want to get. But I am leaning more towards it, not just because of that, because you don't want to get Mence. You don't want to lose half of Mence's health and then get your Swampert blown up on. You know, one or the other, both manageable, but you can't have both. So it was a very good way of cutting the losses and committing. So I take it back. That EQ was definitely the right move. And Bad Dummy gets Intimidate on and some lefties on Gyara. And what's interesting here is that pay attention to the leftovers. Gyarados gets leftovers first. That means it's a Jolly Gyarados. That means it is going to outrun Aerodactyl and HP Rocket. So suddenly, with this little bit of information, we see, oh, this Gyarados is a threat to sweep, you know, if it thaws out, obviously. HP Rock even means that it hits Salamence harder in one-on-one. And it, I mean, the problem is that with HP Rock, you don't threaten Celebi as much, but you would much rather have to find your way around a Celebi that doesn't instantly threaten you than Aerodactyl, which instantly threatens you and the rest of your team. So, yeah, that's Gyarados' threat potential. You know, I'm trying to collect the thoughts because there's always so much on any given turn. So, yeah, freeze is really, really nasty here. I mean, the upsides of spamming Ice Beam, right? So, yeah, this gives Mence some lefties back, but at the pace this game is going, I don't think it's going to make much of a difference. Problem is you risk giving it a free DD here. But I think you could pivot to Swampert here, because it's not going to HP flying. I mean, C could HP flying, but you know, HP flying with the -1 Mence against the Gyara that you now know is Jolly and going to be a huge threat, that would be, you know, tough. That's really banking on the this will stay frozen thing, which I mean is an 80% chance, but still, I think Swampert would be a reasonable sacrifice here. Actually, you know what? No, Swampert is definitely the move here, because if you eat an HP fly... Well, actually, with -1, then it might not. The problem is, at -1, you are just... I mean, I'm not doing the calcs here, especially because I don't know C's Salamence spread. Although, from that HP flying, it looks pretty invested, and not like one of those DD Mences, which is all bulk. Then, I would say that it is just strong enough to 2-hit KO through -1, but not strong enough to knock Swampert into Salic range. Because if you could pivot Swampert into an HP flying and get Salic, then that would 100% be the play. Because then you cannot be switched into by Celebi safely, because Celebi can, you know, eat Ice Beams and recover all day long, barring, you know, Ice Beam fun. But it cannot switch in to a faster Swampert that endeavors it on the switch. Because if you endeavor it down to low health, then Celebi obviously gets trashed. And Bad Dummy would be able to spread some really meaningful damage on C's team. Maybe an endeavor on Swampert or something. Before being forced out by Arrow, which is faster than +1 Pert. So that, yeah. There's a pivot back to Metagross. That was, I think, on the riskier side. Well, I can see it. I mean, it makes sense because, because the problem with that is... No, it's a better move than I first thought. No, you're right, because, you're right, he says to himself. To the imaginary audience, actually. Because the move C would not make theirs EQ, and that would be the threat. DD, Metagross it's just going to return to neutral attack, so Metagross would still be able to eat an EQ. So, and then, the threat is it would still not be a good position. Bad Dummy would definitely be, falling behind because he is more pressured to explode, and that would be a prime opportunity for C to absorb it with a mag. So, yeah, that's... but it did, if you pivot into like a HP Flying aimed at Swampert or a Rock Slide aimed at Gyarados, then that's fine. And you can just keep pivoting. And I mean, it's still rough but you're threatening how much was that mash doing? 59? Yeah, even with another turn of leftovers, actually. No, I take back what I said about the forced explosion, because in my mind the Salamence was still out of mash range. But I forgot that even with another turn of lefties, Metagross, it would at least be a roll for Metagross to KO it with mash. So that would be a lot less risky for Bad Dummy. He could just mash, and if mag comes in, then it's not going to be strong enough to KO Metagross from that range. So yeah, that was a much better move than I initially realized. So even here, then with the Swampert switch, then Metagross gets lefties back, and that is valuable. Here comes Celebi. The big thing about that mash on Mence is that now, if Mence wants to like DD on this leeching Celebi, then stalling it out becomes a lot more feasible. There's Protect. Are we going to see Psychic? Okay, Bad Dummy reveals Psychic. Now, so I'm assuming Leech, Psychic, BP. Well, we know it's not going to have SD now, so that's relevant. Like, it would be Leech, BP, Recover, and then SD or HP Grass also possible, but Psychic in the last slot. So it is very feasible we see Bad Dummy actually stay in. Just like, oh, well, what's the worst that could happen? A Leech Seed, right? I don't care. And then, Ice Beam, and then I burn a Leech Seed, and then, this does beg the question, though. It's almost surely not going to have HP Grass, but do you really want to risk it for so little and suddenly become so vulnerable to Metagross when you have a Celebi that is right there? And I guess if you're trying to Ice Beam a potential Heracross last and don't want to switch into it with your half health Salamence, then maybe. So okay, I can appreciate that risk, that calculated risk. But no, it's Celebi's going to come in and Psychic here. So Bad Dummy shows lefties first and doesn't show BP, so maybe it's just not there. I was thinking, is that... Oh, no, I know what set it is. It's Leech, Psychic, Giga, Calm Mind. That is quite popular on some Magneton offense teams. Okay, that's something. The reason why that set can't take over the game yet is because the C's own Celebi will slow BP out into Mence or Aerodactyl or whatever, and they also might have a Metagross. Like that, the last could be Magneton Metagross for sure. But in fact, I think Metagross there would be very good, just as some more backup against opposing, not just rock moves, but double edges. So yeah, I think that's my rough feeling right now, Magneton and Skarmory, or... T-Tar would be good there too. So yeah, one of T-Tar or Metagross I feel is going to show up. Magneton, Skarm, T-Tar, Metagross. Won't overdo that. So here comes Meta again, and there's the SD. So who's it going to? The Swampert getting an SD is kind of irrelevant, because it's still going to be facing off against Celebi and Gyarados, whom it hits with Ice Beams. So, I mean, Ice Beam, EQ, Protect, I don't know, maybe that last is HP Bug or something crazy. But, yeah, that's not really the threat. And that makes it interesting because the Celebi is either going to stand and leech and force the issue, or BP into, okay, there's Magneton. Oh! That's wow. Okay, that was a beautiful move. I was going to say, Magneton doesn't, take advantage of the SD, so, that would have been fine for Bad Dummy even on the turn of, even if he had mashed on the mag switching in, because he's out of range, and then he still has his Metagross. Yes, the Metagross is weakened, and Arrow and Mence are threats, of course, but he still has his Metagross, so it wouldn't have been the worst thing in the world. But so there was also pressure there because if Celebi stays in and leeches and you EQ'd, then you're really in a nasty spot. Because, if Celebi leeching and then leeching a Metagross and then BPing to Magneton is the oldest trick in the book, because then you just repeatedly sub on the Metagross and you are able to stall it out safely until it's in T-Bolt range. So that would have been really nasty to EQ on Leech. But Bad Dummy made an amazing move there. Now that's the kind of comeback move, especially because it came out of nowhere. You think, oh, well, Swampert will come in. You don't need to make that EQ play against Swampert. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. But that was extremely heads up from Bad Dummy, saving that kind of prediction move. Because everything else until this point has been fairly, I don't want to say straightforward, because that makes it sound less than what it is. I mean, just like the pivoting into Metagross and Gyara, that kind of stuff is more... I'm trying to find I hope that whoever's listening knows that I'm not trying to denigrate it as less impressive because it was dictated by the circumstances or whatever. But I think that was this move stood out from what you've been doing so far. So, and that's a great strategy. You hold back that kind of play until later on. It's like, oh, well, he predicted the switch into Celebi and got approximately nothing for it. So, and now I know that he's going to like to predict. And now he's like, oh, he sees Planet Save. That's not going to, well, he killed the Magneton and for completely free and got health back on Metagross. So that was an incredible move. Yet another Ice Beam on the switch, knowing that, look, if the explosion happens, let it happen, and even if he EQs, then he's not going to EQ. Like, he's not doing that much. So, great Ice Beam, and there is the Giga Drain, indeed. Leech, Psychic, Giga Drain, Calm Mind. So, getting some health back. In comes Meta again, which quite risklessly into the Celebi now. I mean, I say risklessly, but there is indeed a Metagross there. So... Also, this is why replay commentating is so much better than live. I mean, I'm thinking about doing a set 2 at the time of this video. Live, when it happens in a couple hours, but it's, I don't know, you just can't get the level of analysis that I think high-level tour games like this deserve. Anyway, remember that whole thing about Swampert switching into an attack and getting Salic and now threatening with Endeavor? That's exactly what's going to happen. So now we know the stakes. There is the Salic. The most hilarious thing would be Aerodactyl switching into Endeavor, but you don't do that, because if you do that, the game is over. Or very close to it. So, I mean, it could also just feasibly stay with Metagross here. It's gonna, yeah, see, there you go. Oh, yeah, you definitely stay with Metagross there, and the speed tables are turned. Interesting to note there that Metagross is Lum, which makes sense with SD past Celebi. You don't want your fun getting ruined by a T-Wave or Will-O-Wisp or whatever. So, yeah, taking the Endeavor and Agilitying. And does this have Rock Slide? No, goes for the Mash, not even the safe EQ, even though it can miss, and gets an attack boost. That's going to be rough. Oh, there's a Mash miss, and the Gyara thaws out. Yeah, ooh, that was really, C is too nice. C even goes, okay, good. Like, there's money on the line, this huge tournament. It's like, no, I want to win the right way. I want justice, and I admire that. I respect that. In comes Arrow, and honestly, this is This is scary stuff because now the Gera is going to be a legitimate threat. There is Bad Dummy's own mag, and there's there's the sub. Thing is that it's going to have double edge and not HP bug or flying, almost surely. I mean, it could have double edge, but then it's less threatening against things like Suicune. So it's not going to threaten Celebi necessarily. But yeah, when it is, it does make more. If it's not a Scarm team, it makes more sense for the arrow to be sub Leechy for sure. With Scarm team, whenever Scarm teams use sub Leechy arrow, it just drives me nuts a little bit. But SD pass Celebi stuff, that's something else because you want the flexibility in case you get an SD pass off to arrow. However, even if you have Celebi, Mag, and Scarm, like SD pass Celebi alongside Mag and Scarm, then even there, I think you just, if you can pass the SD to Bandit Arrow and get that like super boost alongside spikes, then yeah, just double edge, rock slide, everything. But yeah, here it makes more sense. So Bad Dummy pivots to Celebi on the EQ, and there's a rock slide, not doing very little, and a great use of Giga Drain there over Psychic to get the extra little bit of health. Every percent matters. Yeah, that is a very bulky Celebi. I mean, I know it's unboosted arrow and all, but yeah, that did nothing. Another Giga Drain, even if you thud into Celebi, then you're not really thudding because it's, again, every little percentage. And now Metagross comes in, just getting more and more health, and I'm starting to think that, well, okay, now I think it's pretty definite. Well, I guess maybe not on that turn necessarily, but I really don't think the Celebi has Leech. If it does have Leech, I think it'd use it here. Yep, there's Shadow Ball, the anti-Gengar maneuver. And there's a Mash. Okay, SD Celebi going one-on-one with Metagross would be kind of hilarious because it can recover off Mashes. I was just going to say, though, if you get Celebi blown up, then that is not bad for Bad Dummy at all. You know, and yes, losing Metagross sucks, but you got something amazing for it. You know, as opposed to, I mean, that just makes that EQ have even more foresight because you can't really pull this Metagross trick off if you have your Metagross healthy. So that move was great because, look, I do not want Metagross losing this much health for, you know, Magneton. Like, who cares about Magneton? And because it's going to make everything, it's going to make Metagross so much more easy to play around with C's other Pokemon. So yeah, that really was a great move. Now it gets, it's also important to note that now if Metagross blows up, Bad Dummy will take an important target with that Metagross, no matter what. You do not want to sack any of Salamence, Swampert, Arrow, Celebi at this point. They're all valuable, especially because Bad Dummy's last is still unknown. So Mash makes it more interesting because now you can get that without necessarily having to sack the Metagross. So there's the BP, and there's the Swampert, and there's another Mash Raise, but I don't think you go for it. I think you switch to Gyarados and take advantage of the fact that the Celebi is weakened, and you just keep your health on Metagross. Unless your last is Salamence and you just really want to smack that Pert with a +2 EQ. That I understand, but no, that's the right move, especially because C is so pressured to go for, oh, great move. That was a great move. That was an amazing move even, because if Metagross stays in, it's EQing. And if Metagross switches out, then it's going to be to Gyarados or Celebi, both of which Salamence is good one-on-one against, because Bad Dummy switches first, because Metagross is faster. Switch speed mechanics, very important. And that means Gyarados intimidates the Swampert. Who cares about that? You know, so that means Salamence, if it comes in, then it intimidates the Gyarados. Beautiful, amazing, incredible move. Gyarados still is faster and is going to threaten HP Rock, and there's the T-Tar. And if this is not a DD Brick Break Mence, well, okay, so the Sand is finally active, and that is incredibly relevant for both sides because it means no more passive lefties recovery on Celebi or Gyara, and on C's end, Celebi and Mence. This needs to have Brick Break to, I mean, I guess you could sack the T-Tar here if you're going to, and it does have Rock Slide, okay. I was going to say, you could sack T-Tar here, see if it's Brick Break, and then pivot around with Gyara. I mean, I guess you don't really have that much choice. If it has Brick Break, it's not going to have EQ. It's not going to have EQ or Rock Slide, and by the time you figure out which is which, then, I mean, before you made those moves, you would obviously think it through. It's like, oh, what is more likely here based on the plays, based on the team, everything. But you could definitely still be wrong. It's not a definite science, and wind up losing, more than you could have otherwise. So I was thinking, is it worth it to check for it by going to Gera? Because if it brick breaks, great, and you know everything, and you have HP Rock to threaten, and then you can pivot around more. And if it EQs, then also fine, and you can go back to T-Tar almost. Then there's the risk of C EQing on the switch, but you're playing a dangerous game either way there. So, but he chooses to stay in and eat the +1 EQ and Rock Slide. And of course, it's not like Brick Break is a standard. At this level, you have to consider all these options, especially because it is a great option specifically to do exactly that. That whole DD Mens can't even break through a healthy T-Tar thing. That's why, or Blissey, that's exactly why you use DD Brick Break sometimes. But the coverage does, have its own problems. So you have that. What was I going to say? Yeah, but you could also make the case that, look, at this point, he can't afford to be, he can't afford to play too safely. You got to take some sort of calculated risk. So, interesting to note that even though this is why score can be very misleading. Like, I've seen games that ended in a 6-0, which were super close throughout, and games that ended in a 1-0 that were not close for 1 second. And what's interesting here is that Bad Dummy still has all 6 Pokemon alive, but definitely with all the ways that the pieces have been falling, then it's not like, oh, he's up 6-3, he must be super far ahead. It's like, oh, not the case at all, as we're about to see, because this arrow is definitely about to KO something, and that's just going to be the beginning of it. Especially because Swampert is still very healthy. Celebi's low health, but you look at Bad Dummy's team, 47 Metagross, that's going to be half. A Celebi that's not passively healing anymore. Gera, same. Mag is not the most threatening thing in the world to these Pokemon. If it has HP Grass, it can maybe do something by forcing out Swampert, but otherwise it's just going to get sat on. And, Bad Dummy's own Pert at 14, so there's the Rock Slide. We also see that the T-Tar is going to not have lefties, so Lum. Good call, so probably DD. So, in comes Metagross. Oh god, this is going to get ugly. If the arrow starts subbing, looking for mash misses. But it's a good move mathematically because, if the if the Salamence EQ did that much, then arrow's going to do way, way less. And if the arrow doesn't, that's a great move, if only, because you're not worried about prediction right now. You're worried about positioning and forcing conditions, forcing situations which you can tangibly take advantage of. So, what you do is, by going to Metagross and mashing there, if the arrows start subbing, then you just pray, obviously. You can't do anything about that. I'm sure that Bad Dummy was definitely considering going to Gera, but you can't stay in because you just risk getting KO'd. And then, sub on the switch, and then it's ugly because even at -1, then Arrow is actually incredibly threatening because Swampert dead, Magneton dies, and Celebi could make things happen. Celebi's actually, once Celebi gets in, then that Giga Drain is going to be very good because it's going to force a recover from C's Celebi, and then Bad Dummy will be able to switch to Metagross. But by going to Metagross there, what you do is pretty much just guarantee not literally. You can't, account for, the RNG aspect of it. But, RNG willing, then here's what you guarantee. Either that arrow EQs and doesn't KO you and you kill it back in return, or Swampert switches out, or Aerodactyl switches out, you don't get your arrow, and Swampert comes in, and you get more lefties on Metagross, and seeing how tight this endgame is, then you guarantee, then you really, really want, I should say, every single percentage that you can get with that Metagross. So that was a really great move, really heads up. So Meta gets lefties back up to 59. Swampert being worn down, who cares? Magneton, great move. Oh, that's a beautiful move. That is a really, really gorgeous move. Because, look, yeah, Celebi, Gera is switching in, Ice Beam. But the thing is that you don't want to just EQ. You don't want to just let them in for free, as much as it might be obvious. So that was a great move from Bad Dummy. Both because, yes, okay, if it does just eat the EQ, it eats the EQ, who cares? You can't even pivot around Aerodactyl with Magneton anymore. You'd risk just giving it a sub. So, I think that was a great move because if it Ice Beams, which is very likely, I should say, because C does not want their team getting harassed by Celebi and Gyarados for free at this point. Gyarados is threatening to sweep once it DDs. Got to get all that chip damage. You almost want Bad Dummy to trip and say, oh well, here, have my Celebi, have my Gyarados. But you don't want to EQ into them either. So that was just a great move from Bad Dummy, because you lose your Magneton, who cares? And on the bright, potentially you get to keep your Magneton and put more pressure on them. So there's Toxic saying, I don't have HP Grass, because if you do have HP Grass, there's no reason not to use it. Because if the Celebi comes in on HP Grass, who cares? You Toxic it then. You know its moveset. Misses oh, that sucks. If that I don't think that on a team like this is going to have Refresh Pert. But if that lands, then Metagross suddenly becomes such a threat, because Swampert can no longer switch into it. But we do have Celebi. If there was a time to Calm Mind, it would have been on that Protect. But C is really... No, that was too tough a call. You can't do that. You can't Calm Mind on the Celebi and then not force the Recover as well. Even if you do force the Recover either way, if you're of that school of thought, then you still wind up giving it more health than you would have if you tapped it with that Giga Drain in Sand. So, but what was a good move on that on Bad Dummy's end, the move is either Celebi or Swampert. Or sorry, Protect or Celebi. And Psychic there is really good, because you don't risk losing one of your remaining 5 Giga Drains. And you hit Celebi harder, obviously. But now you might be more inclined to Giga Drain, because you know you're going to connect with the Celebi, and that gives you more health back. So, and that's important too, because again, every percentage you can get. How much health did it gain back? Was 6% or 4%? That could be the difference maker against Aerodactyl. So, yeah, very beautiful Psychic. That was perfectly done. The Toxic Mist also, biting. But Metagross gets another switch, and Celebi is 10% less healthy than it would have been if it had just come in on Calm Mind. If the move was going to be to switch out after the Calm Mind, which it of course was, because SD Shadow Ball Celebi will beat that Calm Mind Celebi one-on-one every time. So Metagross does the same thing, just mashes. You don't even care about the Swampert. You care about getting lefties back. I guess you are on more of a timer now, though, because that beautiful Magneton switch, then it was for naught. It effectively got EQ'd, I guess. Actually, worse than that, because it wound up giving Swampert an extra turn of leftovers by switching in, and then Swampert protected and then dodged the Toxic. So, just getting EQ'd on the switch would have actually been better for Bad Dummy than what actually happened. Yeah, and now that makes that whole timer thing even nastier. And here's the part where you start thinking, okay, is C just going to be continuously relentless with those Ice Beams? And I think most players would probably make the case for just spamming Ice Beam over and over and over again, because Metagross's Mash is not super threatening, and Metagross is so important against Aerodactyl. You cannot risk it. And Celebi and Gyarados, they're more flexible in how they can still be useful even if they do take this next hit. So I think that was the case for Ice Beam. And Bad Dummy he knows that. So he goes to them over and over. And if C Ice Beams, fine, freeze or crit, whatever, notwithstanding. And if C is going to not make that Ice Beam move, then just as good. Or even better, obviously, of course. So back to Metagross on the... I thought it was going to freeze for a second. That was so scary. To be clear, I'm not rooting for either player, but I am rooting for the game here. So Metagross pivots back in against a -1 Pert. And is Gara going to pivot in again? Now the Ice Beam is seen. I don't know that Gyarados switching out of Swampert was necessarily the move. Because if it is HP Rock, what else could it be? HP Ghost? I mean, I think at that point, that's when you start DDing. Yeah, no, you DD there because if Swampert wants to stay in and slug it out, then you start peppering it with boosted EQs and, double edge or whatever, if that's your last move. I assume, right? Like DD, HP Rock, double edge EQ. Then you EQ it a couple times, and then when you're too weak to take another Ice Beam, then you double edge for even more damage. At +1, maybe even +2, depending on the math. Then you are going to chunk that Swampert down really hard, and then you are able to, threaten more with Metagross. The question, I guess, would be if you really need Gyarados' health back, or if you really need Gyarados healthy to help you deal with the arrow once it subs down to Lychee Berry. And to that, I would say yes, probably. So that's fair enough. I guess I would say in that case, then maybe Celebi was the switch more. Because Celebi's health is not really important anymore so much as just allowing... Yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, at what point, what does Bad Dummy need to do to break through C's team? Because Gara, I think, might be too low for it. Celebi's not going to do it against that Celebi set. So C is still definitely looking in control. I mean, the closest you could get is like Swampert Endeavor. But where do you get Swampert in without losing something? And everything else is more important than Swampert. It's kind of like it's almost a 3v3 effectively. It's not, obviously, but yeah, there aren't really any clear answers here. So Gyarados switching in it's now it's a lot dicier. That Toxic Mist winds up being really, really brutal. And he does it again, completely undaunted. This time he gets that 1v1 against the arrow. Problem is, of course, Swampert's going to stay in again and again. So I'm wondering, do you blow up the Swampert? And no, you can't, because then you might just lose to the Celebi one. Yeah, no, actually you cannot lose to the SD Celebi one-on-one. That is actually what is at risk here. So oh, Jesus Christ. So Ice Beam once again, and now Gara is just going to falter into nothing. I mean, it's almost like you're... Okay, that was a great move, because I was just about to say, are you going to PP stall the Ice Beams out between Meta and Gara? And C was clearly looking for that -1 Metagross opportunistic switch. And that was why that move from Bad Dummy was so great, because he just switched Gara, which an Ice Beam was aimed at, into Celebi, who you also don't want to take an Ice Beam. So that was very clearly with intent to switch into EQ, and it's a better move than staying with Gara if you expect EQ, because Gara does not threaten Gara does not threaten Swampert one-on-one, where Celebi does. So that was another amazing move by Bad Dummy. So the question is, because it's always the same cycle. Celebi switches into Celebi, and then Metagross comes in, and then Metagross can't break the Swampert, and you can't switch into Swampert forever. So there's a double to Metagross on the Protect. Great move, because either a Protect is coming out there, or a double to Celebi is taking place. And either way, you get more lefties with Metagross, and those are obviously going to be crucial. And now I'm thinking you just got to... stay in, and C finally does use EQ, reveals that at -1 it does 36. That EQ does fairly respectable damage, but not quite enough. And there's another Ice Beam from C. Amazing, amazing move. And another double to Metagross. This time Celebi is nailed. So that... Bad Dummy not with no feet off the gas at all. And a mash, I was going to say, you're going to start looking for mash raises, but now it's going to be a mash, miss instead. So I think you sack Gyarados, and then you go to Swampert or something. Oh, well, it intimidates, and God, this might be, an offensive team is actually potentially PP stalling this Swampert. There's the DD on another EQ. Oh my God, it actually worked. I was going to say, like, maybe that double... Oh, no, you can't double to Swampert. You have to double, as Bad Dummy, you have to double your own Swampert into C's Swampert. So, yeah. That would be the move there but that's really tough to do. Yeah, you can't even do that, I don't think, because Celebi checks with BP. and before switching out of the Metagross. So it's not like you can even, oh, I'm going to pop the Swampert on the Swampert switch. No, it's going to BP, and if a C sees that you are going to Swampert, then they will just go to Arrow instead. So DD on EQ, this could, that's a great play. Okay, I guess it wasn't HP Rock, it was HP Flying. And maybe it's just a really slow DD Mance, I don't know. Well, that's a significant chunk, and suffice to say, I think this game would be very close to over if that Toxic had hit. And there's the Endeavor, and Celebi is brought down. I mean, I don't know. This is still going to be tough. Yeah, I was going to say you can recover stall it for a while. I mean, I guess you recover stall out the 8 Endeavors, or a few remaining Endeavors, I should say, because it's not 8 anymore. And, you know, if Ice Beams, then that's going to do less. So you're really hoping to just not get crit frozen. But if that Swampert gets that, it did get that Endeavor off, and that did make something happen. But Celebi needs to stay healthy, because otherwise, well, no, Bad Dummy's own Celebi is in arrow range. So it's not as essential anymore. So yeah, okay. BP again, in comes Swampert into the Metagross. Bad Dummy going for that mash raise. And Celebi comes in on the EQ. Beautifully done. No, there's so much pressure on C to get that right. Is he going to call Mind here on the Protect? He does. Oh, wow. Okay. That was incredible. And now that Psychic into the Celebi is actually going to cause some mayhem, I think. Alright, never mind. That is a very bulky Celebi. But it's going to be taking less damage. Do you just... Oh, yeah, he's going for the crit! Okay, and he doesn't get it. Yeah, I was going to say, does he Giga Drain for some extra recovery? Because now he can't even switch to EQ anymore. But now Metagross comes in. And I was going to say, maybe you slow BP? Because, yeah, I think slow BP was the move there. Because if the Celebi stays in, then you just go to Arrow. And you want to have your Arrow in. That's the whole game. You know, Bad Dummy wants to get Swampert in and maybe make something happen. And C wants to get Arrow in to make something happen. So... but, I mean, Shadow Ball there is fine, because it doesn't really change anything. Well, no, because it does, because that would be one less Meteor Mash you are switching into, or EQ on the Switch you are switching into as C. And there comes Celebi in again on the EQ, and now Swampert in with Endeavor. Oh, just going for the Torrent Surf. Nope, Endeavor. I mean, it might not have... Oh, no, it does have Ice Beam, I was going to say. Yeah, no, of course it does. It used it earlier. Recover, so now you just hope, well, that Ice Beam does not, sorry, I skipped by accident. That Ice Beam does not crit or freeze. Yeah, okay, sorry, there we go. Metagross coming in again. Is it EQing? Is it mashing? It's mashing. There's the raise. Okay, but I don't think... It's not going to be able to take Pert EQ into +1 Arrow EQ. Maybe. What is that last move on? Is it Rock? It could be Rock Slide, I guess. But if it's Agility, I was like, use it there. And then the game is over. But yeah, Pert is still in range of... Okay, that was a good Celebi switch. Because now with Shadow Ball, you just want to keep Metagross's health low enough to where Arrow can sub down to... Well, it's definitely not Agility because it would have been used there. I was going to say to where Arrow can sub down into Lychee range for it, but going to... Oh, it is Rock Slide. Oh my god, is it going to flinch? Yeah, now you go to Swampert, get extra leftovers, and then EQ, and then it's definitely in range. Because, you know, while you're subbing down to +1, you don't know the Metagross's spread. Maybe you reasoned... Or maybe you calced it out based on the Salamence EQ earlier, so you have a general estimation. But you also don't want to sub down to Lychee and then, oh no, I gave it extra lefties, and then the whole, then it lived and then I lost. You know, so going to Pert first was definitely correct, and no flinch, and a crit to boot. That's That's unfortunate. So C is going to take this game one. And honestly, I want this, I'm going to make this the only game in this video. And I will do the other, yeah, that was a really unfortunate game. You know what? How I said earlier, how before I was rooting against baddummy because the whole, I mean, I still don't like that behavior, obviously. But I think if he's listening to this, that was an incredibly well-played game. And I don't think he should be saying that stuff about how he sucks anymore, because that was an absolutely ridiculous performance. You know, so many times you see games on the big stage like this, and they just wind up really being disappointing for one reason or another. But and I mean, that's to say nothing of C's performance in this game, which is also absolutely stellar. So I like this game so much that it deserves its own video. And that's, yeah, I'm going to get to the others. Yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching / listening. I hope you enjoyed this series. And looking at the time, I think this game has been analyzed roughly for 1 full hour, give or take. So yeah, that was really incredible, and I cannot stress enough how well both of these players played. And 2 Celebi Magneton offenses crashing into each other. How fun. Thank you so much. I will see you in the next one.